when you lost 3 pounds. So in the first week, you lost 3 pounds on this, right?
That is correct.
Your GLP-1 is a natural hormone that's in every single one of our bodies. And your GLP-1 lets you know if you're full. It's a satiety hormone. So when your GLP is working properly, it does help suppress your appetite as well as reduce those cravings. It's a sugar-free fast melt caramel. So what it's going to do best is it's going to reduce your sugar cravings or any other cravings you have in your body. It's going to suppress that appetite. But where Melissa got the most benefit, I think, over the last week was the L-carnitine. The L-carnitine tells your mitochondria, this is where you make, we've talked about it before, this is where you produce energy in your cells. It actually tells those mitochondria to burn fat for fuel. We're noticing other people losing up to 7 pounds in the first week. 4 pounds has been about the average. As you lose weight and as you take these Bella Melts, it's going to help lower that blood sugar in your body as well.
All the information is there. MelissaHouseBG.com, MelissaHouseBG.com. Just now introducing for the first time Bella Melt with GLP-1 Fast Action.
Welcome back to Live Up to Freedom. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am Aynaz Anni Cyrus, your host, as I have been for over a decade, and I want to take a moment to say thank you. I have received so many messages from you, words of encouragement, prayers for me and my people in Iran, lots of understanding. I appreciate you. You all know it wouldn't happen if it wasn't for your support in all shapes and forms. And we are live, as you know, on WorldViewTube.com, WorldViewTube X and YouTube, also WorldViewTube app. And if you don't have the app installed, I strongly recommend you do install it. It is for free, available on your app store, and it will send you notifications so you never miss the important truth we are exposing every day right here on WorldViewTube. Also, we're live on X America News on X, and we're live on all my platforms: Rumble, YouTube, X, Facebook, and Substack. Go ahead and put those comments in. I will do my very, very best to get to them today. However, as I said yesterday, I have a very special guest who's going to join me here in a minute, and he is such a wealth of knowledge that I want to make sure every possible moment of today's program is given to him to educate me and my audience and enlighten a lot of people who might not know the truth or might be confused about the truth. So, but do put your comments in, especially if you have a question for him. Please put them on all cap so I can see him quickly, and we'll try to get some of your questions in for him at the end of the show on the 4th segment. Without further ado, I have prayed, I have studied, I have binge watched his interviews, which, by the way, he does have a Farsi show for my Farsi speaking audience. I strongly suggest you go and follow him, watch his weekly show on Channel 1 TV. I have binge watched his programs, and I have, to be honest, felt a little nervous for today's interview, but I am very excited. The moment is here. Without further ado, it is an honor and privilege to introduce Dr. Alayar Kangarlu. He's a physicist. He is also an associate professor of clinical neurology at New York's Columbia University. Also, he is the founder of Qur'nus. You all know it as Phoenix Project of Iran. Dr. Kangarlu, what an honor. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Annie, for inviting me, and it's a great opportunity for me to talk to your audience as well.
Absolutely, and I'm normally a talker, but I have practiced today to stay as quiet as possible so we can learn as much as we can from you. There is so much to talk about. I wish we had a full 24 hours of your time, but I want to start from what has been hidden by many propagandists out there from public eye of especially American people, and that is the Phoenix Project of Iran. A lot of people out there have no idea that Crown Prince Pahlavi and his team, including yourself, have worked extensively with actual research data for so many years to come up with the most comprehensive plan for the first 100 days after the fall of this monstrous Islamic regime in Iran. So floor is yours. If you could tell us about the project, how long it's been happening, what is the result as today, and we go from there.
Yes, Annie, you know that the Middle East is really currently trembling under the weight of this what we can really call geopolitical earthquake. This is actually an expression I borrowed from Robert D. Kaplan and his new piece that he has in National Interest. He has written extensively about Iran. He's very knowledgeable. And he knows very well, as he points out in this article, that for nearly 50 years, the Islamic Republic in Iran has acted as the region's really primary empire and disruptor. And they have been fueling proxy wars with Levant region, the Syria and Iraq, all the way to the Persian Gulf. However, the internal and external foundations of this regime are fracturing, as the events of the last 3 weeks show. For 47 years, Iranians have been fighting against this regime every step of the way. Every few years, every decade, we have large-scale demonstrations, and the regime puts them down viciously and mercilessly and cruelly. Iran, in the last 47 years, has lost hundreds of thousands of their youngsters, either in the war or executions by this regime. And one of the reasons why this regime still is in position of power is because, according to the opposition group, the Iranian opposition, didn't have a leader. I think in the demonstrations last week, in the last 2 weeks, Iranians on the streets of Tehran and other cities showed that there is only one leader, one indisputable leader for opposition, and that is Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. He's been tirelessly, since he was 17 when he first came to this country for training as a fighter pilot. He's been fighting for Iran. He's been leading. He's been struggling. He's been forming coalitions. And one of the formations that he made was Qoghnus, or the Phoenix Project of Iran, in which we gathered around a large group of Iranian scientists from different walks of life with different specialties. And we started writing programs and preparing plans for Iran after the downfall of the Islamic Republic. This project started 5.5, 6 years ago, and it's been ongoing. And then later on, Crown Prince started another project, more politically oriented rather than scientific and expert community. And in this one, he has gathered together a bunch of very young people, a new generation of Iranians, and they've been really helping him to get the message out, the message of leadership and the message that the Iranian opposition has an indisputable leader, and that is the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. And if that was a barrier and an impediment against coalition and coalescing of the Iranian opposition forces, now really nobody has an excuse to call the coalition and the opposition leaderless. We have a very well-established leader, a leader who has a very good understanding of the kind of society that the Iranians who are fighting out on the streets want to build in Iran. And his followers who actually responded to his call for action a couple of weeks ago, they came out on the street and paid a heavy price. The Islamic regime in Iran massacred hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe tens of thousands of youngsters mercilessly. And unfortunately, the global community, the international community, paid very little attention to the atrocities of the regime and the fact that now, for the first time, Iranian people are responding in droves to the call for action by Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. I think his leadership leaves no room for what kind of society Iranians are yearning for, and what kind of society he wants to build in Iran, which should be a music to the ear of the Western people, especially Europeans and Americans. And something that really perplexes me is the lack of enthusiasm from the Western community for his leadership, for his established leadership. Of course, I'm sure that you've heard that today the European Parliament took a vote on inviting him for addressing the European Parliament, and that proposal was turned down by a margin of, I think, 2-1 or 3-1 votes by the European Parliament members, which is extremely surprising given the sensitivity, given the gravity, given the veracity and the dimensions of the atrocity that the Islamic Republic is committing in Iran. I was expecting, at least from Europeans, to pay more attention to this and bring the only voice that Iranian peoples are listening to the European Parliament, and have him tell the people where Iran wants to go and how Europeans can help. Of course, there are a lot that's going on in the world, not just related to Iran, but independent of Iran. There is this rift between the United States and Europe. You saw President Trump's addressing of the World Economic Forum in Davos. And there was a lot of frictions between US and Europeans. US and Europe are going through, I don't want to say economic and cultural divorce, but they are kind of establishing their own independent political position, perhaps a more independent military power. Europeans are thinking about establishing a European military and not to rely on the United States or the NATO at large when it comes to the points of crisis and the time of crisis, like the invasion of Russia to Ukraine. And so there are those things that are going in the background. But at the same time, Iran and the downfall of the Islamic regime and the struggle of the Iranian people in bringing this regime down needs European and American support. Of course, we all know that President Trump has an entirely different worldview and angle to the problem of Iran and the problem of the world, for that matter. And it's very refreshing the way he's looking at the world problems. He truly, in the last 12 months that he's been in office, he has really put America first. He is pursuing a very aggressive policy of protecting the interests of the United States, not just the interests of the global community at large, or even the Western community, but first the interests of the United States. And he views the interests of the United States, once fulfilled, would automatically fulfill and protect the interests of the Western world and the free world at large, which I happen to share that point of view. But while these big global issues are happening in the background, then we have the Iran problem. And the Islamic Republic has taken advantage of this huge crisis, global crisis that's going on, the conflict between the United States and China. We know that Abraham Lincoln, an aircraft carrier that has been sent to Persian Gulf, its mission is really in the South China Sea, and the United States is really establishing a zone of conflict, the zone of separation between China and the United States. And Abraham Lincoln was missioned to work and stay in the South China Sea. But the situation in Persian Gulf and the plan that nobody knows really what's going on in President Trump's head, but the plans he has for the Islamic regime has called for assembling and amassing a large number of hardware from the US Navy and the US Air Force. We know that 3 squadrons of F-15s have been sent to the region, and Abraham Lincoln is aiming to Persian Gulf. And we will see what happens in the next week or so when Abraham Lincoln and all this hardware arrives in the region. But a lot is happening. America has plans for cleaning up the house. By the house, I mean the Middle East. The Middle East is a region of 400 million people with a very good purchasing power, which makes a lucrative market for American products. You know that, Europeans, all the major trade partners of the United States, including Europe, China, Mexico and Canada have really been treating the United States unfairly when it comes to tariffs and impediments against the introduction of American products to their markets, while the US consumer market is wide open to them. And this is really the point of gripe by the President Trump, and the reason why he's applying so much tariff to these countries, to really level the competition ground between America and its major trade partners. In the middle of all of this, the United States has to really pay attention to the problem of Iran, because Iranian people have been struggling for more than 4 decades. And now all this struggle is coming to fruition. The crescendo of Iranian demonstrators and the intensity and frequency of these demonstrations are happening so often and so vast, and that, in the last 3 weeks, according to the reports, of course, the Islamic regime has completely disconnected Iran from the global internet, from the international internet, and has really covered Iran into a digital darkness. But nevertheless, all the little amount of information that's coming out of Iran, there are about 100,000 Iranians who have Starlink, and the information sent out from those few Starlink connections are pointing to crime against humanity. They're pointing to genocide against Iranian people, that once the true dimension of this crime has been revealed to the international community, I think they cannot do anything but paying attention to it and giving their utmost attention. European Union has just taken a few steps. As I told you, the parliament vote on inviting Prince Reza Pahlavi to directly address the European representatives. Also, the European Commission has just declared the IRGC, the Islamic Republic Guard Corps, the Pasdaran, or the true protectors of the Islamic regime, as a terrorist organization. This is a big step forward, because for years and years and years, Iranians have been asking European Union and the European Commission to declare Pasdaran and IRGC as a terrorist organization. And eventually, it took a massacre of magnanimous dimension that happened in the last 3 weeks in the streets of Iran for Europeans to eventually step up to the plate and declare Pasdaran and IRGC as a terrorist organization. And I've heard that there are efforts in expelling the ambassadors of the Islamic Republic from the European capitals, and calling all the European ambassadors from Tehran back to Europe. So all of these steps are telling us that a lot is happening, and a lot must happen. Iran is in need of attention of Europeans and Americans, because ultimately Iran and Iranian people, unlike their neighbors, unlike all the countries, the people refer to the 24 countries in that part of the world as the Middle East. But unlike many countries in the Middle East, Iran is not really a product of colonial map making with artificial borders. Iran is an Indo-European civilization with a history spanning millennia, more than 3,000 years. This cultural depth manifests today in a population of over 90 million people, one of the largest and more educationally advanced in the Muslim world. And this country, Iran, has a lot to offer to the United States and to Europe and to the world at large. I'm going to stop here to let you continue with your line of questioning, but I will follow up in telling you what really constitutes the power of Iranian human capital and other resources that Iran can present to the world. So we are not just asking Europeans and Americans to help Iran to rid itself of this tyrannical regime in Tehran, but also we have something to contribute to the betterment and to the improvement of the economy and security of the Western world, that in particular the United States and Europe, once we receive that help and form a free Iran.
Well, I appreciate it. I thank you. You set the ground for so many questions. I do want to talk about some of the things you mentioned, and I also want to say, thankfully, our audience, especially here on my platforms and Worldview YouTube, they're very well informed when it comes to Iran, the Iranian people, the culture, the benefits, the natural resources, and why sometimes it feels like a free Iran could be fairly dangerous to the elite, to the globalists, which I know you also have a lot about to say about globalists. But let me ask you this first. So I agree with you. I'm very shocked as to why many are not backing Crown Prince Pahlavi today, especially after 25 days of seeing him in action. We have played his videos right here on my show on Brannan House Live, where he is not just asking people, he's actually leading. He has a day-by-day plan. Every night he's releasing a video with the next step or the step back or 2 steps forward. It is pretty, I would say, disappointing. But then when I talk about my vote, that goes, I have announced it over and over that he has my vote of any form, monarch or republic, he has my vote. I get this question of, you don't know him. You just read, the research from other people. You listen to his videos. I know you do. Dr. Kangarlu, I know you have sat across Crown Prince Pahlavi, not once for a dinner, but rather for actual productive planning, research, ideas. Would it be okay for you to tell my audience about Crown Prince Pahlavi as a person, and a patriot that we Iranians know that he is, and a lot of Western media are trying to paint him just as a son of a dictator? Tell my audience about the true patriotism and personality of Crown Reza Pahlavi.
Well, he has an extremely pleasant personality. I've spent hours and hours and hours of time with him during the time that we were brainstorming for the formation of Qoghnus, the Phoenix Project of Iran, bringing a large group of Iranian scientists from around the world to pay attention and propose projects for Iran post-Islamic Republic. I had this idea of forming this community of scientists. We divided the organization, the Phoenix Project of Iran, into 14 different divisions, each division dealing with particular specialty. We were really working like a government cabinet. We had people in charge of international relations and somebody who acted like the Secretary of State or the Foreign Minister. We had Department of Education, Department of Agriculture, Science and Technology, and so on and so forth. It just so happened that, during this process, I had these long conversations with Crown Prince about a variety of issues, from very fancy issues on the physics of the origin of universe, all the way to philosophy, to agriculture, to water purification, to environment, to education, to international relations, to coexistence in a very hot area like coexistence. And I found him profoundly informed about every issue, even in the issues that, nobody has expertise in every issue. Even in the issues that, he might not have expertise, he would ask relevant questions. He would ask profoundly important questions. And it was quite obvious that, during the entire time, all these hours and hours, hundreds of hours of time that I spent with him, and some of those conversations are extremely boring in nature. Einstein says the greatest achievement of mankind is to develop the ability of sitting in one place for long hours and doing boring things. So this is if this is one of the highest achievements of the world. During those boring conversations, I had his full attention. Most of our experts, all of our experts had his full attention. And that tells me that this man is, not everybody has attention for everything. But there are those people who think their position in history and in time and space requires their attention, requires learning about a wide variety of subjects. And that's how he came across when we had a conference in Georgetown in February of 2018, when we announced the formation of Qoghnus. And during the entire time, he was sitting in the front row. And for hours and hours and hours of presentation by various experts, we had his full attention. He asked a question about every subject that was presented. These were like really scientific conferences. that were held in both the Conference of Formation and the announcement of Cornus in February of 2018. And 6 months later, we had our first scientific conference in Toronto, Canada. And there also, the Crown Prince, along with his wife, Queen Yasemin, they attended the entire conference, and they sat and patiently listened to every single scientific presentation, which tells me both about his passion for the formation of Iran, and he knew that. I mean, you know that your attention, our attention, human attention, is really our biggest asset. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how beautiful and healthy and strong we are. Our attention really constitutes it really carves up, it forms our future and the quality of life we have. And your attention basically decides who you're going to marry, how educated you will be, what social status you will have, where you will live, how expensive your house is, how content with your life you are, and so on and so forth. And if attention is a measure of caring for issues, he told me that he showed to me over and over and over in various occasions that he has tremendous attention for issues specifically related to Iran. And that tells me how much he cares for and how much he understands and how much he appreciates for the role he will be playing in constructing and in really compensating and repairing the damages that the Islamic Republic has inflicted on every aspect of Iran as a nation. And he considers himself to be left with the huge load of responsibility of first ridding Iran of the tyranny of the Islamic Republic, and two, immediately after the downfall of Islamic Republic, he considers himself responsible for rebuilding and compensating for all the damages that has been inflicted to our national interests in the last 5 decades. So from when I put all of those pieces and all the experiences that I've had with Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, he tells me that he's uniquely qualified from every aspect of the job requirements for the leadership of opposition, and in my personal opinion, in leading Iran in its future in post-Islamic regime as the king, a benevolent king like his father and like his grandfather.
Amen. And I want to narrow this. I want to really zoom in for my audience. When I say things, and you all know, I admit that I'm extremely biased, though I have a fairly good understanding of history and I'm a very good researcher, but I do admit I'm biased. I want you to understand when Dr. Kangarlu says the patient explains this and that, I will remind you, he is a neurologist. He's talking from actual scientific fact. This isn't some biased idea of, oh, okay, Aynaz grabbed another pro-monarch and they're just bigging things up. This is factual result. He's correct. One of the things, Dr. Kangarlu, I have touched on, not extensively, but I have touched at one of the issues we have in the world today, specifically in America, is that our new generation, their attention span is like tiny bed, and that is what's creating the laziness and lack of motivation, not wanting to be leaders. They just want somebody to tell them what to do so they don't have to think. So from that understanding, I completely agree with you. When you have a leader, and my personal opinion, which could be very irrelevant, please do correct me, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi could have picked any lifestyle and, enjoy his family, raise his beautiful daughters, and say, hey, you had the chance, you lost the chance, move on with his life. The fact, for me as an Iranian, the fact that he has dedicated his entire life in exile to not just lead, not just try to replace the power, but actually spend time, energy, efforts, risking his life and his whole family's life, because my audience are very aware that Islamic Republic of Iran's regime does not mind killing people. He has put all of that into actually tangibly putting together a plan, as you said, and I have read every single word of that 100 days plan. it is tangible, it is doable, and it will repair a lot of damages in a very short time. Does any of what I think in my head and claim make sense?
Well, first of all, Annie, I wouldn't call you biased. I wouldn't call you biased. You can call yourself biased, or your audience might call you biased, but I think everything that you've said so far, in my opinion, is not only true, is the only way that we can save Iran. Right now, there are no leaders. Don't even come close. Other leaders among the opposition, the leaders of other groups in Iranian opposition, they don't even come close to Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi in many regards. First of all, in terms of popularity, no one. I mean, you've heard that, when people call your name while knowing that calling your name could be responded by a bullet in their head, that is a true measure of popularity. I mean, we have popularity. There are people, you can say Leonardo DiCaprio is popular, but no one expressing popularity for Leonardo DiCaprio will get killed. I wonder how popular he would be if expressing interest in him you have to pay the price by your life. He would be very unpopular if that was the price of popularity. So people who are prepared to pay the ultimate price in the streets of Iran and still insist on expressing his role in the future Iran and inspired by him, I think that is a true measure of popularity. And, in the last 3 weeks and the last 47 years, we haven't heard any other leader's name from demonstrations, from street demonstrations, from university campuses, from sports stadiums. You know that every time there is a sport event, tens of thousands of Iranian people get together in stadiums. The only name you hear is the Pahlavi names, his father, his grandfather, and himself. And that's what Iranians have decided to do. They remember, of course, almost 70% of Iranians living today, they never experienced life under Pahlavis, but they've seen news and the footages from the Iran's life under Pahlavi, the power of Iran under Pahlavi. In the last 15 years of Mohammad Reza Shah, the last king of Pahlavi dynasty, Iran was experiencing double-digit economic growth. Iran, in the last 15 years, basically between 1960 and 1979, Iran was today's China, was today's South Korea. We were on our way to be the Germany of the Middle East, and perhaps within a few years, becoming one of the members of the top 10 economies in the world. Unfortunately, for the Islamic Revolution that, perhaps in another show, we are going to get to the reasons, the historic reasons and cultural reasons and geopolitical reasons for the sudden fall of the Pahlavi dynasty, and how a totally unknown clergy called Ayatollah Khomeini suddenly appears from the woodwork and becomes a popular leader, and goes to Neaufle-le-Château, goes to France for 6 months, and is received by the French government like a celebrity, and they provide him with all kinds of security and resources and access to the media, and he's talking to Iranian people directly, and eventually the US government, the French government provides him a chartered airplane, chartered jumbo jet, to fly him from Paris to Tehran, and he lands in Iran while there is a military government in the martial law actually in Iran, and nevertheless they allow his plane to land, and they allow the people to go to the airport, and they allow him to basically continue his subversive activity in Iran. Very different from the way that the Islamic Republic is treating its opponents. Islamic Republic not only doesn't allow the political leaders to land in Tehran and go and have political rallies, it actually assassinates them in the American and the European capitals, as it has done in the last 47 years. 365 political figures, Iranian political figures, have been assassinated in Europe and the United States by the Islamic regime. So it was, in spite of the bad publicity that the global left has given to the Pahlavis as tyrants and dictators, that's how they treated the most prominent political opposition. They allowed him to fly a chartered plane, land in Mehrabad airport, and people, hundreds of thousands of his supporters, go to the airport and allow him to do political rally and everything else that happened in the February of 1979 when the Shah's government fell and the Islamic Republic was established. Now, this regime has learned a lesson, not to be lenient to their opponents. And that's actually an understatement. Not only that they have not been lenient, they have massacred their oppositions. Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of their political opponents have been arrested, assassinated, and executed in Iran, raped in various mass movements like the Women Life Freedom movement that happened in 2009. I mean, the numbers are different. The Iranian government hides all the victims of their suppressions of the political rallies, but the numbers run anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 people who were killed during that uprising. And there's been multiple uprisings, basically one every 2-3 years. And every time the people's protests, peaceful protests have been confronted and have been put down mercilessly and cruelly by the security forces of the Islamic regime. And now we have arrived in the last 3 weeks at a point that the world cannot deny that Iran is in crisis. The moment of decision, the big decision that the Europeans and the Americans have been kicking this can down the road and have been, talking from both sides of their mouth when it comes to the critical issue of Iran. I think those moments are gone, and we are at a critical juncture that they have to make a decision. We saw what happened in Davos. We saw what happened in the European Parliament today and yesterday, and something that Europeans must have done 10 years ago, 15 years ago, perhaps 2 decades ago. Now they feel compelled that they have to make these, for them, tough decisions. They were very reluctant to make the decision of declaring the IRGC as a terrorist organization. They tried every trick, every excuse not to call them. Of course, the United States had declared them as a terrorist organization during the first Trump administration, and Biden chose not to reverse that decision. And the US has been much more decisive and much more aggressive when it comes to confronting the terrorist activities of IRGC around the world. But Europeans have been very compromising and very appeasing when it comes to deal with the Islamic Republic. During the JCPOA negotiations, the so-called nuclear negotiations, Europeans were taking a very compromising line. The agreement that resulted after 2 years of long and tedious negotiations between the Islamic Republic and the representatives of the so-called P5+1, the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, plus Germany. Eventually, that agreement was called JCPOA, and it was signed by the United States and the 3 European countries and China and Russia. And it gave the Islamic regime a 10-year period during which they will stop all their nuclear activity, after which, at the end of that 10-year period, which happened to be the last October 18 of 2025, they were allowed to basically resume all their weapon making, pursuit of nuclear enrichment, building long-range missiles, and propping up all the terrorist proxies around Europe and the Middle East, and put the region basically to fire. That was the content of agreement, that the so-called JCPOA, or the nuclear agreement. And President Trump, in his first term in 2018, as soon as he came to office, he withdrew the United States from that agreement. And by withdrawing from that agreement and activating and applying all the sanctions, all the primary sanctions and the secondary sanctions against the Islamic Republic, basically rendered JCPOA useless. And from 2018 until 12 months ago, when he was inaugurated for his second term, President Trump has been a force in depriving and denying the Islamic regime from all the economic and financial fallouts of the signing of that nuclear agreement, and has really put a lot of pressure, what he calls the maximum pressure policy, on the Islamic regime. And that is one of the reasons why the Islamic regime has not been able to do whatever he wants to do, in spite of all the basically disturbing activities that they've done, all the disrupting activities that they've done in basically every capital of the countries in the Middle East, in Lebanon, in Gaza, in Damascus, in Baghdad, and in Yemen. In basically these 5 capitals in the Middle East have been completely in control of the Islamic Republic, and their proxies have rendered the national government of those countries completely paralyzed. And the Middle East, as I told you, a region with 400 million population, a very rich region that could really constitute an economic market comparable to Europe and even in the United States, has been paralyzed, and all its potential has not been materialized because of one single reason, and that's the presence of Islamic Republic in power in Tehran. So the consequences of downfall of the Islamic Republic are far, far reaching. It goes well beyond Iran's border. It's not just liberating Iranian people, but it's actually bringing the Middle East, the entire Middle East, back into the fold of the Western economy. Right now, the Western economy is suffering from the ripple effects of the economic divorce between the Western world and China. You know, what we call globalization, something that happened in the last 2 decades of the last century, between 1980 and 2005 to 2010, we, meaning Europeans and Americans, we decided that allowing all our manufacturing to migrate to China and let consumer products be manufactured cheaper in China is to the best interest of our economies. This was a very poor judgment, but nevertheless, for a while, it contributed to the economic prosperity in Europe and in the United States. And a lot of people refer to globalization as a very successful practice, as a successful project. But then the chickens came back to roost when the Chinese established themselves as the second most powerful economy in the world. They started building their military, and they started challenging the United States and Europe. Then Americans and Europeans decided to part their way from the Chinese. And now we are almost in the middle. We are in the second decade of that economic divorce, and it has its own consequences. One of the consequences is invasion of Russia to Ukraine. One of the consequences is the atrocities of the Islamic Republic going uncontested by Europeans, and the appeasement efforts of Europeans, and kicking off this can of dealing with the Islamic Republic down the road all the time, and by that helping this crisis to be aggravated, and in the meantime, the Islamic Republic become more powerful and more aggressive and more tyrannical. And you know, if you know you have to deal with an enemy, it's best to deal with the enemy the quickest possible, especially an enemy that is getting stronger by the day. The longer you wait, the bigger problem you have to eventually deal with. Europeans and Americans know that they eventually have to put this regime down. They have to help Iranian people to rid themselves of this regime. So if they came to the rescue 20 years ago, the price would have been much less. The dimensions of massacre and the oppression and atrocities that the regime is doing in the process of a national revolution, something that's happening right now, would have been much less costly. And as we attend to other probably significant global problems and put the Iran issue on the back burner, the problem grows. So you don't want your back burner problem become much more dangerous than your front burner problem. And that usually is a sign of misappropriation and misjudgment. I'm glad that, you know, I think with the appearance of 2 figures in the United States and Israel, Bibi Netanyahu in Israel and President Trump in the United States, they reversed this course. They brought a fresh look and a different and unorthodox political analysis to the issues of the national and global crisis. They confronted the Islamic Republic head on. The 12-day war back in June of 2025, during which Israel assassinated something like 40 of the top generals of the Islamic Republic. The generals whose hand was up to their elbows into the blood of the Iranian people, they assassinated them within the first, I've heard different numbers, within the first 20 minutes of the start of that 12-day war. And they assassinated 20 of the Islamic Republic's nuclear scientists, the nuclear scientists who, just like the scientists serving Nazis, were empowering a tyrannic regime which had no intention other than blowing up the region and wiping Israel off the map. So those scientists were really, actually the name scientist is inappropriate. They were criminals, just like the military criminals. Scientists also serving the tyrants can empower them and can commit atrocities beyond the capability of the tyrants when they are not as powerful as the scientists and the military people and political mercenaries are serving them. The way that we see the Iranian diplomats around the world, specifically Mr. Arakchi, their foreign minister, is whitewashing all the atrocities. So these two characters, President Trump and Bibi Netanyahu, they have been dealing, first of all, they have a very good understanding of where the Islamic Republic is coming from and what their true intention is. And more importantly, how a free Iran can serve their interest, the Islamic Republic has created an existential threat for the state of Israel. And this is not a claim, this is not a political analysis, this is something that explicitly, these are words coming out of the officials of the Islamic Republic, out of their mouth. And their intention, and they have no qualm about hiding this intention. They are very explicit and very aggressive about why they are building nuclear weapons and why they're building long-range missiles in order to wipe out Israel and in order to drive the United States out of the region and then do with America's allies like Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Kuwait and other allies and Turkey and Egypt and Jordan, what they did with Israel, basically rule over the entire region and rule with fear and intimidation. This is not acceptable. As I told you, Middle East is too precious, too rich, too geopolitically important for allowing this to happen. A large number of American presidents really didn't share that view about the Middle East. Trump and Bibi Netanyahu did, and thank God that they have, in the 12-day war, they completely diminished their nuclear and largely diminished their missile power. And I'm hoping that one more time, perhaps the next week or the next month, they help Iranian people to finish this regime.
I am with you in that hope and prayer, but I do disagree with few points when it comes to Trump. I agree and some with Netanyahu, and I would like to break that down. If it's okay with you, we're going to take a quick commercial break.
Sure.
Let's grab a drink, and then when we come back, we're going to dive into probably first Israel, because that's more of my favorite, and then America, and try to help our audience understand why we are where we are. Guys, don't go anywhere. Share the feed if you haven't yet, because this conversation is about to get even deeper. You see why I was so excited and nervous? Like the information that is just being provided. And he was involved with the 100-day plan of Crown Reza Pahlavi for Iran. This is not just analysis, as he said. It's a lot of research, a lot of information, a lot of history. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You are watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon House.
Hello, I'm Brannon House. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now, and we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview.
Welcome back to Live Up to Freedom. Thank you so much for staying with us until now. We greatly appreciate your attention to this matter. Yes, I went there. And when you sign up for Vault, you get information that you don't find anywhere else. Example, today, you don't find this information anywhere else, right? There are many left or right Americans who are analyzing what's happening in Iran. Many are analyzing what the Middle East means. But when you have a guest like mine, Dr. Kangarlu, you hear the reality of life experience, years of understanding and research. So why don't we do this? Let's go ahead and bring Dr. Kangarlu back on so we can do a little bit of deeper dive into, if you don't mind, Dr. Kangarlu, I like to start with Israel first. The reason, I'm, in my personal opinion, as an Iranian, as an American, as a huge supporter of Israel, the people of Israel, the land of Israel, not necessarily agree with the government all the time, which is normal human behavior. I feel like in last 12 months, Israel has helped the Iranian people far more than anyone else. And including the 12 Days War, one of the parts that I think we might be in disagreement is during the 12 Days War, I was screaming, President Trump, please stay out of it. President Trump, please stay out of it. Let them finish the regime. But then unfortunately, after the B-2s dropped, we reached a ceasefire with the mullahs, which we both know it's never a good thing. You don't make a deal with the devil, especially Khamenei type of devil. But another huge part that surprises me is Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi has said publicly that after the Islamic regime, under his leadership, even as a transitional government, he will make history again, just like on March of 1950, his father recognized the state of Israel as the first country in the region. Crown Prince Pahlavi is going to recognize the state of Israel immediately. Why is that not a full weight of support for Europe and America to say that on its own is going to solve half of our problem, because there is no more funder of Hamas, Houthis, Hezbollah, or any of them? It puzzles me. Maybe you can help me understand why that hasn't been the point.
The short answer is global left. But I need to really unpack this claim that the global left is one of the biggest problems that the Western world is dealing with. Basically, when we talk about the left, the word left is really a political term, is not a geometric term. If you look at the history of Europe, history of the modern world in the last 200 years, Europe, United States, and the rest of the free world, when Industrial Revolution happened and people learned, mostly Europeans, learned how to generate wealth from other tools other than earth. For tens of thousands of years, the only source of wealth generation was the earth, basically during the agricultural era. There was no other way of creating wealth. I mean, there were jewelers and industrialists and so on and so forth, but nothing in the scale of post-industrial revolution and humans' ability to generate wealth. And this happened primarily in Europe for about 100 years until it started spreading to the rest of the world. And while generating wealth is a very good thing, but then accumulation of wealth and distribution of wealth became problematic. Societies became unstable and social crises started propping up in the countries where they had massive amount of wealth. You know, the reason why Marxism, Karl Marx and Engels came to pass, and the reason why they came up with their idea of Marxism directly dealt with the issue of distribution of wealth. So creation of wealth became one issue, which was solved with industrial problem, and as more and more discoveries in the realm of engineering and inventions was made, the human capability for generation of wealth went through the roof. And the more wealth generation tools and technologies we developed, the wealthiest some individuals became, and the more concentrated wealth in the hands of a few have become, and that constituted a social problem. The vast majority of people, not necessarily very poor people, but this skewed distribution of wealth started really causing problems. All the revolutions, you know, the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, and all the socialist revolutions that ensued, the rise of capitalism in Europe, in China, in Vietnam, in Cuba, and even in Iran, was the result of the protest to this distribution of wealth. Europeans solved this problem by in a very educated and a civilized manner by dividing their political arena into two groups of the left and the right. The wealth-generating political parties and the wealth distributing political parties. So the wealth generating and maximizing the political affiliations and the political lineage that supported wealth generation was traditionally referred to as the right or the conservatives, depending on whether you're in America or in England or in France. And the left became the ones who were really for wealth distribution. Now you can look at the world and you can see that the wealth distribution people, or the leftist people, have become extremely powerful because these are mostly educated people, and some of them are very wealthy people. You know, some of the billionaires in Europe, like George Soros, and some of the, you know, during the 2016 election, the number of billionaires who supported Hillary Clinton were almost 90% of American billionaires supported Hillary, compared to very few, only a handful of billionaires supported Trump, which tells you that even billionaires have a very guilty conscience for this massive amount of wealth that they have amassed, and they feel like they have an obligation of helping a vast majority of people who have been disenfranchised and been deprived of this wealth to gain some part of this help, and that's what constitutes what motivates their efforts, their political activities, and the hand they lend to all these pro-left, pro-Palestine, and one of the reasons why the European left and American left is mostly in the Democratic Party, they have been reluctant in pursuing an aggressive policy vis-a-vis the Islamic Republic.
Can I, just to clarify, I want to make sure I heard you correctly. You said the left in America is mostly on the Democrat Party.
Yes.
So
yes.
Is there a left group that is in the Republican Party?
No. There is a so-called left wing of the Republican Party, but that is really a division of tasks rather than having a political significance. There are more moderate wings, and there are more conservative wing, and then the more leftist wing of the more mild
Socialist
version
Democrat.
of the Republicans. This is a division within the Republican Party and has nothing to do with the distribution of wealth. The distribution of wealth is a big story that has, in my opinion, has completely paralyzed Europe and has turned Europe. I have stories to tell you regarding this matter. Europe, which was the heartbeat of science and technology and wealth generation and military power, has now reduced to, Europe is one of the richest regions in the world, but today, Europe basically militarily and from the safety point of view is at the mercy of the United States because they have, the support for the military and military industrial complexes and investment in the country's safety and security is considered to be a right-wing issue. And the left is usually for reduction of the defense budget, limiting the hands and the control of the military industrial complexes, and so on and so forth. And by doing that, they have not been able, the Democrats and the left in the United States have not been able to do the same thing in the United States as the left has done in Europe. But the left in Europe has completely hollowed out the manufacturing, especially military industrial manufacturing in Europe. And this is the reason that today the military of England, of Britain, is smaller than the military of Costa Rica.
Oh, wow.
And if it wasn't for the United States, Russia could basically roll their tanks over the entire Europe, and there was no force really preventing them. The United States, on the other hand, in the last 80 years after the formation of NATO, the US has invested 3 to 4% of its GDP in defense, and that's why we have the most powerful military in the world. Europeans, on the other hand, actually, this is really, you might be curious, and you might already know this fact, that according to the constitution of NATO, every member nation of NATO, they're required to dedicate 2%, at least 2% of their GDP to defense. And Europeans bringing numerous excuses. They have avoided doing that. And most Europeans have lowered their defense budget from anywhere to 1.5% to 1%, and some countries to even less than 1%. Until President Trump came along and told Europeans during the invasion by Russia of Ukraine that if you don't step up to the plate and fulfill the membership requirements of NATO, the United States is not going to support you, because for the last 7 years, you've been really receiving our assistance and our charity, and you've been relying on American military protection for Europe. Instead, you've been dedicating those 2, 3, 4% of the GDP that you had to apply to the defense budget. You've been using it for social programs, and you have created a very inefficient economy as a result of this very generous social programs that encourages lack of competition and lack of economic activity by the members. Some of the European countries, I think like Greece, you remember the Greece financial crisis of the 20 years ago. Greece at that time, the retirement age in Greece was 52 years, which basically meant that, almost at the prime of your productivity, you were entitled to retire, and depending on the life expectancy, and the average life expectancy of European people are around 80 years. So vast majority of the people in Greece could live 30 years, could collect 30 years of retirement benefits, which was unsustainable. I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that Germany came to the rescue of Greece's economy, then Greece would have collapsed at the time. So these are really two different mentalities, two different worldview. The US has really been more realistic. The US has been put more emphasis on the significance of military. So military industrial complexes in this country are very well established, and they're part of the mainstream industry. A lot of the technology that we are using today, Annie, was developed by technology. I'm talking about the non-military technology. If you take your cell phone, basically every app that you point to on your cell phone, the important ones, like email, was developed by DARPA, by research division of American Defense Department. The camera application on your cell phone was developed by the Air Force because of the time that all our U-2 spy planes were flying over Russia and taking pictures. That those pictures were saved in films on films, and this film, the plane had to fly back to a station to drop those films to be developed to know exactly what to have taken. So eventually they developed these electronic sensors that they could take the pictures and process them and see the pictures on site. So basically, all of this, the reason why most of the science and technology is happening in the United States, to some extent, is the significance we attach to the military industry and the amount of research and development that is happening in the US military. And this is something that Europeans didn't see the benefits. And that's why, as far as the defense research and defense manufacturing goes, Europe is decades behind the United States, and they have a lot of catching up to do. You could hear all of these facts in the speech that Friedrich Merz, German Chancellor, gave to the World Economic Forum in Davos today, and he said that the Europeans have realized that they are behind in military industry and military technology, and they are resolute in covering that gap, the gap that might take decades to cover. But Germany has been very aggressive, and some other countries, France and Britain, also have been very aggressive in trying to establish an independent military technology and military capability independent of the United States. And that's something that, in the future will have consequences in the world. It will have consequences in the relationship between US and Europe. And once Europeans are militarily secure enough to establish their own political position and declare their political independence from the United States, then the world will be fortunate enough to have two United States, United States of America and United States of Europe. And that will be best for everyone. It will be best for Europeans. It will be best for Americans, because Americans don't have to carry the burden of the security of Europe. They would be able to attend to they have bigger fish to fry in the South China Sea. That's what they're doing now. That's what they will be doing in the future. And at the time of crisis, in situations like Iran, where once the problem of Iran is solved, Iran can solve some of the problems for Europe and for the United States. Unfortunately, we don't have time for me to get into the details of how Iran can solve some of the major, not minor problems of the US and the Europe, but Iran can contribute to the well-being and the betterment of the economy and the security of Europe and the United States in significant manner. And the fact that, go ahead.
No, continue.
And the fact that the US and Europeans, of course, the US before Donald Trump, didn't appreciate the role that Iran could play in strengthening the hand of the United States in dealing with these hot topic issues like China, like Russia, like European security, like security of the oil fields in the Persian Gulf, like the narco traffics in South America. In all of these issues, Iran could play a huge role, and the fact that this fact has not been appreciated by Europeans and Americans, at least not in a way that reflects in their policies vis-a-vis the Islamic Republic, is really mind-boggling to me. And I'm hoping that, after the events of the last 3 weeks, there will be a fresh look at this problem, and we will see a drastic change of course in the US policy and their European policy towards the Islamic Republic.
Yes, we can't give up hope. But before I go where I want to go, could I ask if you would give me the honor to come back next week, and we can talk about the details that we won't get to talk about today about Iran and its benefits?
Absolutely. I'll be glad to, Annie.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So let's go back to something that I have tried to make most of my fellow Americans understand. Step one right now is for, hopefully, for United States of America and Israel militarily to take out the Islamic regime. That's definitely a step one. But for me, a step two is way more important than a step one. What do I mean by that? When the regime is over, is there going to be a respect to the call and blood of Iranian people inside Iran for Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi to start the transitional government? Or will we face another hijacked revolution like 79, where my audience are very familiar with them, with the MEK and their hundreds of thousands of dollars in pockets of many former and current politicians is going to be placed in power? I think that's the most important part of what's coming, rather than just focusing on removing the regime. So if you would please tell my audience, first, your knowledge of how much Mujahideen Khalq, MEK, also known as PMOI, known as NCR, known as NCRI, that tells you what a great leader in opposition it is when they have to keep rebranding themselves. But what do I know? I'm biased. If you would tell my audience, one, your knowledge of their infiltration into Europe and US governments, former or current, also the absolute deadly danger of an attempt by Western countries to try to place them in power in Iran.
If the Western countries make any attempt to support MEK for taking power in Iran post-Islamic Republic, they have made the gravest and the most lethal mistake they've ever made in their lives, in the modern lives. And I have to give you the good news that I don't think, in my opinion, by looking at the configuration of forces and the sequence of events in Iran in the last 3-4 decades, I don't think there is such possibility, regardless of how powerful those countries are and how intent they are to support MEK. Because as you saw in the last 3 weeks, a vast majority of Iranians have already decided who they are rooting for and who they're supporting and who they're hoping to be their next leader after the collapse of the Islamic regime. And the diversity and the spread of the Crown Prince's message all throughout Iran. You know, during the last 3 weeks, I heard demonstrations happening in little towns in Iran that I didn't even know they existed. You know, basically the entire 31 provinces in Iran, there were demonstrations recorded, and we have valid evidence. And all of these events, the recording of all these events and a transcript of all these events are being prepared to be forwarded to all the major decision makers, to the European Parliament, to the European Commission, to the US Congress, and to the White House, so that they know that we know that the extent of support and popularity of the Crown Prince is undeniable, and there's nothing that they can do in order to combat that. I don't see any reason why the United States or Europe should want anyone other than the Crown Prince to be the leader of a free Iran, because ultimately the Iran that will form, that will become a trusting and a reliable partner, a political partner, a security partner, an energy partner for the United States and Europe, would be a free Iran, a democratic Iran, and a secular Iran. And MEK doesn't represent any of those three forms of Iran that I told you. They are a sectaristic, a cult-like, and an Islamic fundamentalist group of people that, you know, they have a very close cult. They practice all kinds of ancient cultural Islamic rituals that doesn't make them really distinct from the culture of the people in power in Iran today. And that is really not to the benefit of the United States or Europe to prop them up. Maybe there was a time, and the reason why they received some attention for a while was because there was really no clear indication as to which one of the political leaders the Iranian people will pick. But I think one of the benefits, in spite of the dimensions of the tragedy of the demonstrations in the last 3 weeks, one of the benefits of the last 3 weeks was that the name of Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi was established beyond any shadow of doubt, beyond the point that any European or Americans can try to prop up another group and impose them on Iran. Ultimately, Americans, Europeans, Israelis, and even Saudis and Turks, they know that the revolution in Iran, the national revolution in Iran, will be conducted, will happen, and will be led by the Iranian people. No matter how much they bomb the nuclear sites or the missile sites or the proxies in Lebanon and Gaza, eventually the political power in Tehran has to be overthrown by the able hands of the Iranian people. And as President Trump has said, and definitely Europeans have no such intention, there will never be any American boots on the ground or any European boots on the ground. Absence of any European or American boots on the ground, regardless of how the sequence of events will evolve, Iranian people will eventually overthrow this regime. The only thing that Europe and Israel and the United States can do is to really establish a balance of power between the people and the regime by really disempowering the regime. They cannot overthrow the regime. Iranian people will overthrow the regime. And basically, anyone who overthrows the regime will establish their own ideal government. So as a result of all those dynamism, I'm not concerned at all that anyone other than the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi will lead us into the ultimate moments of overthrow of the Islamic regime and establishment of a secular free Iran post-clergic regime in Iran.
Absolutely, and amen. And yeah, I hope you're correct. I hope, because I have watched for last 3 weeks, I have watched Mayor Rudy Giuliani plugging MEK every night. I have watched Newsmax having MEK members on their shows. I've watched Matt Gaetz interviewing Ali Reza Jafarzadeh, and on and on and on. So, and again, I have also said on my show repeatedly that, believe me, no matter who tries, Iranian people know who MEK is, and we will always reject them. However, my concern is of the momentum. For example, we'll look at Syria. Giuliani, also known as El Shara, Syrians didn't want him, but he still became the president. That's where my little bit of concern comes in. Is this the last battle against the Islamic Republic of Iran for Iranian people, or is this really the last battle? Or are they going to have to now fight MEK? Because as you mentioned on your own program, MEK has about over 4,000 armed soldiers. They can just go into Iran and start killing Iranians, and we know they're not shy of doing that either. But we will pray that doesn't happen. At this point, at least for me, it's to keep people informed, be the voice of people of Iran, shout my vote behind this microphone and any microphone I am given, that as an Iranian, if I'm given the right to vote for the future of my motherland, the vote is solely for Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. And that's that. Nobody's going to change my mind. No amount of money is going to change my vote. It is what it is. And I know I'm just one of many, but we both know there are many who agree with my statement. There's one more thing that I would love to ask you before we go, not related to Iran, but while I was studying and watching your program, I came to realize that something my audience has been very curious about. We have covered it on my show, again, on Brannan House Live. You were a colleague of Zohran Mamdani's father, and you had certain thoughts of yourself about Zohran Mamdani's rise of power in New York City. Do you mind if we close on that before? I appreciate you generously staying over, but I would like to hear your thoughts about Zohran Mamdani in New York City.
Yeah, the rise of Zohran Mamdani in New York and eventually winning the mayoral contest and becoming New York City mayor is really the consequence of the events that we talked about, the wealth generation, the wealth distribution. And, the New York City is personification of life in opulence. And I don't want to use the word discrimination, but wealth, skewed wealth distribution, to put the least. There are multiple billionaires who live in New York. New York has Wall Street, through which every day $7 trillion of wealth flows through one small district of Manhattan. And then there is a vast number of New Yorkers who live an ordinary life. The students, the teachers, the professors, the shop owners, the garbage collectors, the police force, and so on and so forth. They have a normal life, very much like the life of people in Omaha, Nebraska. But then right next door to them, there are these billionaires who live the life of opulence. Remember that I told you that back in Europe 200 years ago, after the Industrial Revolution, and our sudden increase our human ability to generate wealth, the first thing that came to visibility by a large number of people was this the so-called unfair distribution of wealth. That this issue usually has a social justice dimension to it and has a philosophical, moral aspect to it that has an appeal to a large number of people. And this is exactly what happened in New York and in the mayoral race. I don't know whether you're aware of the fact that 43% of the Jewish voters, the young Jewish voters in New York, voted for Zohran Mamdani. This is
Yes.
really... This is really, it came to me as a surprise, but and it tells you that the issue of social justice and the issue of economic justice is even more powerful than your attachment to your ethnicity and to your roots, which was true in the case of the young people, the young Jewish people who voted for Zohran Mamdani. I mean, Mamdani is riding over a very populist slogan of robbing the rich and distributing it to the poor in the Middle East, in the New York. This is appealing to people who have vengeance and jealousy and hostility towards the wealthy people. And I can tell you that jealousy and hostility toward the wealthy people is a very powerful force. It's, in my opinion, is an immoral force, because at least in the United States you can say that in this country becoming wealthy is really a lifetime plan. You don't necessarily become wealthy through blood and nobility. In this country is one of the few countries, perhaps the only country in the world, that you can become all that you are capable of becoming. If you look at the list of all the billionaires in New York and in the United States at large, you can see that a large number of people who didn't come from wealth, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Sergey Brin, all these people, they started from a very modest life, ordinary citizens, and the environment that this country has created, the United States has the best environment. The government of the United States, the culture in this country, the past history of the United States has created an environment that lends itself to people ordinary people bringing their perseverance, their intention for hard work, and their intuition to the table and generating wealth. And along with their getting wealthy, they make a lot of people wealthy too. You know that for every billionaire in this country, there are hundreds of billionaires and millionaires who became wealthy in the process of the wealth generation of these big names like Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos and Steve Jobs and Sergey Brin. So and the same thing that creates hostility and jealousy in the eyes of some people is the point of strength of the United States, is what has created the most powerful country in the world, and a country that really is the hotbed of all the discoveries and inventions and innovations. Silicon Valley, there is no second Silicon Valley in the world, because of that same culture and the same history that I just described. But nevertheless, there are people who really indulge their sense of justice and appeal of social justice and hostility towards the rich and powerful, and issues and messages of people like Mamdani really appeals to them, and that was the source of his success in the New York mayoral race. But the problem with these people is that, I mean, Americans have a very insightful saying: "Be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it." He wished for getting the mayoral position of New York City, but what happened? He became a mayor. Now, the day after his inauguration, he has to serve as mayor. If he starts taxing the rich, if he starts distributing that wealth to the middle class and the lower middle class in New York, then something very simple will happen. The rich will take their money and move out of New York. In fact, during the mayoral campaign, $14 billion of wealth left New York to other states more hospitable to wealthy people and more accommodating to their activity and to their lifestyle. So as I told you, distribution of wealth and creation of wealth can be the two wings of two legitimate political parties and political tendencies. But if you don't have wealth generation and put emphasis only on distribution, you are going to end up distributing poverty rather than distributing wealth. And that will be a fact that I think Mr. Mamdani will quickly realize, and he will confront it. And that will have a sobering and moderating effect on his policies. And I don't think he would insist on delivering on those extreme promises that he made during his campaign.
I hope so. And I hope comes midterm, we don't see more of Mamdani's like Omar Fateh to come to power, because one thing I know that I love the most about America is our freedoms. I don't like it when someone that belongs to any kind of cult comes to power, even as a mayor in New York City. And I like to stay with freedom thinker and freedom lovers as leaders of America until we get to have a free Iran, where then I can say I belong to two very free countries. But until then, one of the fascinating things I wanted to talk to you that we didn't get to do today was the aspect of brain and its processor through how we understand policy, politics, perception, and all of that. So hopefully we get to talk about that when you come back. Any last words of wisdom for today that you might like to leave my audience with?
In spite of all the dooms and glooms that we talked about today, I think the future is bright, especially for America and especially for Iran. I think the moment of decision-making, the difficult decision-making has arrived for Iranian people. They already made that decision by declaring the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi as the leader of opposition. And it seems to me from the events of the last 2-3 days in Europe and some of the decisions that the President Trump is making, some of the decisions that he's making and he's announcing it, and some of the decisions that he's making and he's not announcing it, it tells me that, you know, a lot of good things are happening for the three countries that we love: Iran, Israel, and the United States, and Europe for that matter. And the future is bright for all these four regions.
Amen. I greatly appreciate, I know you are extremely productive and busy man. I can't show my gratitude through words that you gave your time to me, my program, my audience here at Worldview Tube. Javeed Shah, and please be safe until next week when we see you again right here on Live Up to Freedom.
Thank you very much, Annie, for inviting me.
Absolutely. And to my wonderful and lovely audience. I don't know about you, but wow. Let me know. I think that was fascinating. I really do feel privileged to have him on my program, and I look forward to booking him again to come back and give us more information. But let's pray and stay positive like he did. Let's pray for people of Iran. Let's pray for Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi as he fights his way to get the support he deserves. So do Iranian people, for him to be able to, well, free Iran. And as Dr. Kangarlu said, help with free Iran to help Europe, US, Canada, Israel, and many other countries. We went over today. Brannon House, as always, generously allowed me to go over on my normal time. I appreciate you guys staying here. I will be back tomorrow with another fellow Iranian discussing more of the issues. And you all stay safe. I do apologize for not getting to your comments. I do, but I glanced at some of them, and there were some good questions and good comments there. See you tomorrow. Until then, you just stay safe and stay in prayers. Bye, guys.